Content warning. The content of this podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical or psychological advice. The views expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of any professional organizations. If you or someone you know is experiencing mental health issues or a crisis, please seek help from a qualified mental health professional or contact a crisis support service by dialing 988. Always consult with the licensed therapist or counselor for personalized support and guidance. Welcome to Queer in Here, Let's Talk Mental Health, and I'm Alicia Nolan. My pronouns are she, her, 3-time Amazon bestselling author and owner of Choose to Live. This podcast is dedicated to LGBTQ+ mental wellness. A diverse selection of mental health professionals and passionate storytellers will come together to create a safe and supportive space for everyone. Each episode features insightful conversations that explore the unique challenges faced by the LGBTQ+ community, weaving in personal narratives that resonate deeply with experiences of identity, acceptance, and resilience. This podcast will not only provide valuable tools for coping and healing, but it will also foster a sense of belonging, reminding followers that they are not alone in their journeys, and intends to inspire hope, spark dialogue, and promote mental wellness for everyone. Hello and welcome to my very good friend, Dara, who's going to be the guest today on the podcast. But it's weird saying guest considering the concept of this podcast. Dara was on the journey with me to put this podcast together. So just a very good friend of mine. And I'm just so grateful for them as a person, grateful for them to have put this project together with me. And so naturally at some point Dara was going to be on here, but we'll talk a little bit about our journey together. And let's just get started with Dara. Would you just mind telling everybody a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there?
Oh, Alicia, I'm so happy to be here. It is, really just quite, I don't even know what to say. I'm so happy that we are connected in life, all the various ways that we are. It feels like this moment feels big for me. So thank you for having me on the show. Yes, I'm Dara Hoffman. My pronouns are they, them. And goodness, there's so many different ways one can introduce themselves. I am in Colorado Springs and currently have a licensure for licensed professional counselor. And the reason I kind of hesitate before I share that is I haven't been in private practice seeing clients for 3 years now. I still held on to my licensure for various reasons, including that I still do clinical supervision for folks. But a big part of me talking to y'all today is going to be me to share what happened. It's not kind of like, it's like if I was like a nationwide celebrity, people might be like, where did Dara go? What happened? Because for a while there, for several years, I was out there quite a bit when it came to putting information out there as a quote unquote trans expert, in terms of having written a book and published a book, having a YouTube channel, going around the country, doing conferences. And I was interviewed on many, many podcasts and considered a subject matter expert. And then 2022, I went bye-bye and have been pretty much not out there very much, except for those who follow me on social media. And the reason I think this interview feels big is that it's sort of this return of sorts back to share what happened over the last 3 years. And so again, that's why I feel like, especially because of our existing relationship, I am going to be open and vulnerable, and you are a safe person to do that with. And so is this lovely audience.
Yes. Dara and we met through a mutual friend. Gosh, I think we connected about a year ago. And then it took a couple of months to actually sit down and have coffee together, naturally because of our schedules. But we sat down, and I remember sitting with Dara going, oh my gosh, I need to do a podcast with this person. There's just something about Dara that was so calming and so insightful and intuitive. I mean, it was, it's almost like sometimes you get nervous, like you're meeting this new person, I don't know anything about them, and then you sit down and it just, the flow of the conversation, everything happens so naturally that, and I'd been talking about doing a podcast for a little while. It just, I had to throw that idea out there. And then Dara and I, we started working on the concept together, the cover art, the mission statement, the studio, what we were going to do, all these plans and everything. And then, life happens. And, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I would love to. And I felt the same way I had when our mutual friend introduced us. I was looking at things about you online and I was like, whoa, this person's a badass. And I just like so excited and like, they want to meet me. Wow, that's so cool. So I think we both had mutual like feelings about that. And yes, it turned out to be a very natural, easy connection. And my bachelor's degree is in communication. I have always been fascinated by and interested in all the forms of communication, which sounds very generic, but doing a podcast, that kind of thing has been something on my radar and hadn't had the ability to do that yet. And so, yeah, the opportunity to work with you and this be about queer mental health felt like it was all bing, 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 falling into all the right spaces and places. And then, so this was last fall, which would have been fall 2024. And then I had, the reason this is very pertinent is that I had a mini burnout stage, which was not as big as the big burnout that I'll be talking more about. But in retrospect, I can see that over the last 3 years, I have learned more and more how to listen to my body. And what I mean by that is when I begin to feel like maybe there's a direction I'm going in or a decision I'm making that's not in alignment with me, it will come to me in various forms. And there's a lot of ways our bodies tell us when something doesn't feel right. And so I was, of course, not wanting that to be true because I was like, I want to do this podcast. And you kind of ignore these signs at first. But what it turns out in retrospect, I can see was going on was, for one, I didn't know it, but I went back into a very difficult physical health journey for about 3 months, right after you and I started talking about doing the podcast. And some of the physical health stuff I had going on was also happening during my original burnout. And so for one, I know that I have eustachian tube dysfunction. And this thing happens when I get under too much stress, that something happens in my ear. It's a lot like TMJ, where these two little pieces of bone or something, I don't even know quite what it is, they get too close together and it's hard to describe. It doesn't necessarily hurt, but it just feels so dysregulating. It's a presence that's in your head and it makes it very, very difficult to function. I also, at that point, I have interstitial cystitis, which is a bladder condition in which you feel like you have a UTI all the time and you have to do certain things to try not to irritate your bladder. And Alicia and I have talked about this topic a lot, but it has to do with coffee and caffeine. Yes. And I had been dependent on coffee. It had been a part of my identity, my lifestyle ever since I was in college. So we're talking over 30 years of this relationship I had with coffee. And caffeine is the highest stimulant, it activates this bladder condition. It irritates your bladder like no other. And I knew about this for 2 years and I still did not stop drinking coffee. And what this meant was that I would wake up during the night 5 to 6 times a night to have to go to the bathroom, or whether or not I actually had to go or not, it was this burning feeling that I had. And so this started, as well as the eustachian tube dysfunction, in 2021. And so this just was so interesting because I had so many health things going on at the same time last fall, that the ear thing happened, the bladder thing happened, and I finally was like, I have to quit coffee. I talk about it almost every day with people because it was such a big deal.
So
and
hard.
It really is. Those of you who are like, people talk to me all the time, like, oh my God, how did you do it? Like, I don't know if I could. I knew all along I was not going to stop drinking coffee unless it was a health reason, like really, like almost like life and death. You have to stop drinking coffee. And at that point, my sleep deprivation was so bad. And I was I just knew I had to make that choice and to see if it actually helped. And voila, it did in so many ways that I didn't even predict, in terms of me actually now living a life more in tune with myself, in my own natural rhythms, not having a dependency on a psychoactive drug, all those things. And the reason I'm hitting on that so much is because that my physical health, my mental health, my emotional health, spiritual health, all of it intertwined, intermixing. And so last fall, it just came up really strongly for me, because I finally was learning I have to listen to my body. And even if I don't know why I'm saying no, even though I don't know why I'm saying I would really love to do this project with you, but I feel like I need to say no. And it was hard, because also saying no to somebody you care about can be really, really tough. And I then kind of dipped out because of all the health stuff that started happening, and wasn't even able to like hold space or conversation with hardly anybody during that time, except for my closest friends, because it becomes this dark night of the soul where you're sort of like facing your own self and everything that comes up when you're struggling with things of physical and mental health stress. And so long, like kind of taking the long view of it, I can see that part of it was I didn't know I was going to have that come up. And then part of it is that I didn't know that my next calling was going to be to move into the realm of psychedelic medicine. And all of my time and attention was going to need to be put towards that. Again, didn't know that's what was looming out there. I just had something in me telling me, like, this is going to have to be a no, even though you don't know why it's a no. So that's what happened there.
Yeah.
And you were so like understanding and kind and considerate, and you were honest too. Like, I love how you were able to hold space for all of it. You were like, I'm so sad. And also I understand, Dara, and I'm so sad. And I'm like, I'm so sad. Thank you for understanding. Can we still be friends? And
Yeah.
I think it's a great example of how these sort of things happen. And then, here you and I helped with another friend coordinate a big event a few weeks ago together. And that was like, wow, we still like are able to find ways to collaborate, because we know we're meant to do that on a work level. And then also we're meant to be friends. And so, yes, I'm so grateful, though. It takes a strong person to be able to hang in there sometimes when Dara Hoffman goes through these periods of, oh God, I think I have some truth I have to listen to, and take a pause or take a break and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing all of that with everyone. I have to say, I was absolutely heartbroken. I was absolutely heartbroken, but I was very understanding. And in my own personal journey that I've gone through over the last 2.5 years, you can't help but respect when somebody needs to pull away from somebody for their health, whether it's mental health, physical health, emotional health, whatever it may be. So I have the utmost respect for the decision, even though I was totally heartbroken. But I get it, and respect that more than anything. You have to be able to listen to your body. And that is, I feel like, an art that takes a long, long time to learn. I didn't know anything about listening to my body years ago. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. I've learned a lot over the last couple of years, and it definitely makes us stronger at the end of the day. And I genuinely believe what you're doing right now is so powerful, and you bring so much to the community, and the projects that you're working on now, and being able to come together and work on the little project you were just talking about a month ago. So powerful. And I'm so lucky that you were a part of that project. It was just another great collaboration that I foresee us doing a lot in the future together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, to your point about listening to our body, same thing. And I'm sure a lot of people out there can relate. And some of you might be like, I don't know if I listen to my body. And that's totally all right. We are, as a society, are not taught to do that. And so it was, I remember even though I was a therapist and I'm trained as a therapist and I do therapy, when I had a therapist who would stop me in the middle of a session and be like, where do you feel that in your body? I used to be like, why'd you interrupt me? Like, I'm talking. Now I have to start all over again. And so it's kind of funny when I think about that, because little did I know, oh my gosh, like that's where it all is at. I mean, and for me, I don't know if for those of you familiar with human design, I have a specific human design manifest generator. And when I have had different practitioners share with me what that means, they've always told me, like, your body tells you everything. Like, that's just learn to listen to it, and you will be able to follow your life path, because your body will tell you yes, no, yes, no. And it's easier said than done, because like I said, like, you're like, I don't think I hear that, la, la, la. You want to go about things, but you have to recognize you have, in terms of talking about, like, for those of you familiar with internal family systems, like, you have these protector parts that don't want you to feel into your body, because there is truth there that isn't, they're like, we're not ready to face this truth, so let's just think about it too much instead, or let's just distract ourselves with going out with our friends too much instead.
Yeah, feeling the feels is terrifying, and I'm starting to learn to listen to those in that space for what you feel in your body and just the feels in general. Like I feel like a lot of us millennials specifically and later, maybe not this generation, but we were taught to just suck it up, move on, and kind of stuff and ignore or avoid. Like there's all these practices that we grew up learning that aren't healthy, it turns out, for our mental health. And I'm still trying to learn through trauma that I can't avoid it. Things have gotten worse for my mental health the more I've avoided it. And now that I've recognized that and been able to, I don't want to say remove the fear, because for me, I do fear feeling, like heartache, pain, like all those things. You don't want to feel it. It sounds scary, but when I do feel it, it's almost rewarding. It takes off a lot of that heaviness connected to those feelings when you allow yourself to feel. And again, I'm still learning that part of myself, which is why
Yeah.
I've come to you quite a few times to talk about these options that we are here to also discuss today, which is psilocybin medicine, because you have kind of incorporated that into your journey, or your hero's journey, which I love that you brought that up the other day, because it's something that I feel like we've heard before in the past and we've just forgotten about it over time. But do you want to talk about like what a hero's journey is? And we'll just kind of go from there.
Sure. For those of you who have read my book, You and Your Gender Identity, A Guide to Discovery, I patterned my book around the hero's journey. And I had been very familiar with it prior to that, but that was the first time I actually tried to like write something based on it. And basically it's this is from the brilliant mind of Joseph Campbell. And one of the earliest times that Joseph Campbell brought this into the mainstream was working with George Lucas with the Star Wars trilogy, like back when the original Star Wars trilogy. And I'm not sure who reached out to who, but basically Joseph Campbell, he's a mythologist, and he gave consultation to George Lucas and the other creators of Star Wars, like, we need to create this as a hero's journey. So there's this pattern, this almost predictable timeline we can look at when it comes to what, and you can use gender neutral language, like we're just using hero as a gender neutral word right now, because some people have coined it like the heroine's journey, but there's these different stages of it. And what happens is that if you're able to, like, if you think about any story, like you can almost start to predict, like, oh, here's the character who's in their life and they're just bebopping around, and then like something happens, and it could be like something internal or external, and they call it the call to adventure. It's like something is coming to you and saying, you probably need to change. Like something needs to change your life. Are you willing to face it right now or not? And we have this happen in our lives. I tease, but not tease, that I go through hero's journeys. Like I went through one this weekend in just like 48 hours, where I was like, oh my gosh, like I just went through a hero's journey because I got cracked open in a certain way. I sat with my feels, and then I integrated the experience, and I came back with wisdom and knowledge. And it's like the more you kind of learn about this and you pick up on it, you might notice, like, even within a day, you're like, whoa, I just went through a hero's journey today, because you were just thinking it was going to be a normal day, and then something goes down. And the way that you're able to like stay with the experience, be with your feelings, the fears, reach out for support however you can, get through the hump of what it is that you're meant to be learning that day, that month, that year, and then you sustain that tension for a while of like, I don't know what's happening, but clearly there's a lesson in this. I need to stick with it. You keep turning to people for support. You find your wizard who is going to give you magic potions, so to speak. You find your little, cohorts who are going to like help you gather your supplies and as you go on your journey. And then you usually end up facing something about yourself. Like it is something where you can have support from other people, but in the end, it's you with you. And there can be a this can be a deeply moving experience, like you said, where it feels so scary. And then you face it and then you're like, this is me. And I love this scared part of me, or I love this angry part of me, or and I want to befriend you and I want us to become close. I want to understand you. And then you come back, you return. There's usually like conflict and stuff. Let's not forget that. But you return and you're able to say like, oh my gosh, like I learned so much. And then you integrate it. And since you mentioned psychedelic medicine, it's the reason that they call them psychedelic journeys, which is different than for folks, no judgment, but like if they're going to be using ecstasy or mushrooms, and it's more in a like, hey, recreational, going to hang out, go to a party, go to a concert. There's time and space for that. And then for myself, speaking for myself, and what a lot of people are interested in nowadays is the more therapeutic approach to that, or in conjunction. You can have the recreational at times, but here's like, I want to go on a journey where I'm going to have the everyday fears, projections, protectors, all of that go away, because there's a truth I want to get into inside of me and have it come out. There's inner wisdom that's ready to speak to me. And that's definitely a journey. You have to be ready for that. And that's why they have this, there's a protocol that you do to make it therapeutic, where you work with your practitioner or therapist beforehand to prepare for it, just like any other journey. And then you go on the journey, and then afterwards you work with this practitioner to integrate what has happened to you, so it doesn't just end up being like a dream you had that just fades away, and you incorporate what you have learned through the journey into your everyday life. So as I talk about this, I think what I'm trying to convey is that these different ways that we all are humans going through life, we are all connected in that we are all going through our own mini hero journeys, big hero journeys, and we do it in so many different ways. And psychedelic journeying is one aspect of that I have found to be incredibly useful and impactful in my own healing experience.
Yeah, as you were explaining all of that, because one with the psychedelic journey, it sounds like you go through like a hero's journey almost in a session, the way that you've described it. And now I'm kind of taking that picture of the hero's journey and I'm placing it on people that I've met throughout my life. And it feels like sometimes people are stuck at that middle phase. Like you can just tell when either somebody appears unhappy, agitated, or all of these things, that maybe they're stuck. And they can't quite get through that last phase of the hero's journey, of that wisdom or that healing or that change that they're looking for at the end of that journey. And it's interesting putting that perspective on it.
That's a great point, because one of the most important things about a psychedelic journey, and therefore our own journeys, is to a certain extent we need to let go of, well, actually we do need to let go of control, and therefore expectations, which means timeline, which means what do we think is going to happen? And that's what's super scary about it at times. Yeah. Is like, it's the free for all. Yeah, you're free falling through this experience of life or whatever the psychedelic journey is. So for instance, that stuck period could be so many different things. It could be, yeah, that's normal. Like that is you being in a state where you're not quite ready yet to move to that next part. You are meant to still stay with whatever it is, the sadness, the pain, the hurt. Maybe there's ways that it can be moved through you a bit more. And that's where you can, for those who are able to work with certain practitioners. For myself, I have an acupuncturist, a trauma-informed massage therapist, a somatic practitioner, a therapist.
All the things.
And, and then I just learn from, and have so many like wise friends and colleagues that share, like, these are different ways you move energy. And sometimes this is something that really has been occurring to me, especially after this weekend. If you just have the inclination for some reason, like yesterday, for some reason, I wanted to listen to what I call my angry music. And I haven't listened to it in a really long time. I was like, look at me, I'm not listening to my angry music, but I'm talking about Marilyn Manson, Disturbed,
Mm. Mm.
Linkin Park. And I was like, I was at the gym and I was like, I feel like listening to that today. And then on the drive back from the gym, while I was making my breakfast, and I was like, I don't know why, but I think there's just certain energy that needs to be released after all the grief I felt this weekend. And I just have started to just, if something feels like it needs to happen, I just do it. I don't have to know why. And I still don't know quite why. Like, what was that? I'm like, my body was just like, hey, you got some anger. Let's release it. And so that could be a stuck feeling. There's the different ways I just described, but again, it's the body, it's somatic. There's the polyvagal system and all these different exercises you can do to, first of all, ground your nervous system and make sure that you are able to return back to that place of being centered and grounded. And then you can move forward and like push your window of tolerance a little bit more and a little bit more into the places that feel hard and tough. So I think that's an important point to make, is that it's really difficult to go into this just unprepared. And I do think, even on the internet, there's lots of discussion about the different ways you can support your nervous system and finding different ways for support as you go through a hero's journey, whether it's a hero's journey sort of like was forced upon you or you're kind of calling upon it yourself. There are ways to do it so that you can have potentially more success, so to speak, than if you were to go into it without any tools or awareness or knowledge about how this actually works.
Yeah. I have to comment, I think we were almost in the same space in the universe this weekend. So I haven't listened to Linkin Park or anything heavy like that in 2.5 years since my wife died. And for some reason this weekend, I was able to listen to that music for the first time since then without it bringing me to a place that I didn't want to be. So like for the last 2.5 years, I've only ever been able to listen to like upbeat music because I'm a dancer. I love upbeat stuff. I like to move and feel good and all these things. I've avoided like a lot of that other stuff. And this weekend was the first time I was able to listen to it and actually, yeah, I wasn't. It didn't bring me to a place that I didn't want to be.
I love a good synchronicity.
Right.
That's so cool. Yeah, when I was listening to it, I felt empowered. And almost like, yeah, like
Yeah.
I'm feeling it. Like, and it was different than in the past. It's probably been quite a while, at least a couple of years where when I was listening to it, I remember it was actually a year ago when I was working through some things regarding my relationship with my mom, who is deceased. Like that was where I was needing to do it. So I would I need to feel things, and this is going to be hard, but I'm going to do it. Whereas this time it had almost and it was almost playful, where I was like, yeah, I'm listening to my angry music, but I'm not actually angry. I think I just I'm like, ooh, I just got to get this out there. I'm so glad you had that experience.
Yeah, likewise. That's wild. Here's kind of a big question, loaded question, whatever you want to say. What made you start, or what made you say, I'm going to start like psychedelic therapy? I'm going to give this a go. I want to try it.
Yeah. What I have noticed happens for a lot of people is that you start getting called to it. Maybe it was sometime in 2020 that I honestly can't remember. I just remember maybe I'd hear someone there's a conversation I'm overhearing at a cafe about mushrooms. And then I hear it over here, and then I hear it here. And then just something in me is like, that's interesting. So just a little bit of history for me. Prior to 2021, besides alcohol, caffeine, and then marijuana here and there, that's the extent of my experience with mind-altering substances. Well, I did a whip it once at a Fish concert in college, but let's be honest.
It's a little different, but yes, that's awesome.
But but yeah, like I felt like little whispers and like these little hints and clues coming up that year. And so as the year came to a close, I ran into somebody who I knew. This story has a lot of layers to it because this person in particular, she and I ended up becoming very, very very close friends, and just a few months ago, had a very complicated parting of ways. And this person played a huge part in my introduction to psychedelic medicine. For some reason, we were at a coffee shop and I happened to mention she was sharing what she had been up to. And she mentioned she and her partner were guiding psychedelic journeys. And I was like, what's that? What do you mean? And, we started talking about it and I was like, oh, that's so weird. I've been thinking about this. And this is what a lot of people end up saying. They're like, I've heard about it. And then this conversation came up and then this opportunity came up. So, because I know some people out there are like, I wonder if I should do it or not. Like, just like we're talking about, just be patient, see, like Oprah. I mean, for goodness sake, she's been talking about psychedelic medicine now a bit more often. So I don't want to project, but I think she's getting the call a little bit because she's like asking all the questions and wanting to know the things. So that's where I was at in that point. And so I ended up about a month later, after some preparation work with this person, going on my first psychedelic journey, which was a psilocybin journey, mushrooms. And it turns out the person I did this with, who was my guide, she was intuitively figuring out how much I should start with in terms of the dose. And it turns out she said it was 3.6 grams, which apparently is very high for a first timer. But the experience itself, as I was about to go into this journey, the month leading up to it, I watched documentaries about it. I read about psilocybin, and I started to feel a relationship forming with it. I mean, like it's alive, and there's a wonderful documentary on Amazon Prime called Fantastic Fungi that really just like spoke to my heart, and I just could feel it like in me. And I was like, I think this is something I want to try. And I felt like I was going on a first date is what I remember feeling like. Like, I'm like, it just feels like me and mushrooms are going to have a first date. And that was my intention going into it. It's good to set an intention before you go on these experiences. And I was like, I just want to get to know mushrooms. What do you like? And honestly, like a lot of it, I mean, there was a lot of, so what happens is like, then for this particular journey, you're lying down, you're listening to music the whole time, which is journey music, which is like you said about the hero's journey. It takes you through an arc. Like it's like the whole time I'm like, this sounds like a movie soundtrack. Like here's the beginning where it's like do 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 do, and then you're like do do do. It's not like scary music ever. It's just like intense. Right when the medicine is taking you to intense places, because it starts off easy, like you're gliding into it, and then it reaches a peak, and then you kind of have a slow come down. And so you have eye shades on. You've got your guide sitting there in case you need water or you have anything that comes up that you want to talk about. But for the most part, you're encouraged to just stay in your experience. And that's what I did for several hours. Lots of visuals. Oh, I remember I loved it the first time when I could feel it kick in. The reason I knew it was that there was a pillow on the bed and I said, oh my gosh, the pillow's moving. And then I was like, no, it's breathing. I was like, the
That's how you know.
Breathing. I'm breathing. I am pillow. And so, yeah, that's neat. But then the rest of the time, my eyes were closed for the most part. And so my own experience with that, I would say there weren't necessarily any answers that gets revealed to you in it. There's just a different way you experience life afterwards. And for me, and when I've had other psilocybin and psychedelic experiences, I keep being reminded about how much our thoughts are so disruptive in our lives and our days. Like, and it's not even like if it's like a bad or intense thought, it's just our thoughts are they're just there all the time. And it keeps us from being present and still and actually being able to truly hear what I'm now calling messages, like as opposed to thoughts. It's like, oh, I'm thinking. But if I'm just quiet, it's not that you're just a lump of clay. Like I will then feel like I get a message where it's like, oh shoot, maybe I should stop eating that food, instead of me like researching and listening to podcasts and talking to everybody about like, why am I feeling my gut is so disrupted? And I just like let it go. And then it just like this impression comes upon me where I'm like, dang, I bet it's that. And then so this is something I still have, can tell the wisdom of the medicine of the mushrooms is with me, because this is a big life lesson for a lot of people, including myself, is just how much we need to learn our minds, how much we need to befriend our minds. Because those thoughts, I mean, I'm still like, oh, like there you are. You're so talkative today. Like, I wonder why. Well, maybe let's try to chill a little bit and see what happens if we do that. Like, I'm not a proponent, no, about like, these thoughts are toxic. Let's banish them. It's a very internal family systems approach of like being kind to them, listening to them, showing them compassion. And like I said, yeah, for some reason, the last journey I went on afterwards, I felt befriending the human condition is what I am now doing, because it's not easy to be a human, and we can do so many things to be able to be, when it comes down to it, just loving ourselves and being kind to ourselves can just start. It's just been the biggest change for me. And it's only been probably 2 years that I finally know what that's like and what it feels like.
We are so complicated as human beings. And then you throw in the mind. Again, I've learned a lot about myself over the last 2.5 years. And listening to what my brain is doing at times. Sometimes the messages aren't very clear on what's happening, and it might take a little while. It might take a couple of hours of my brain spiraling to like go, okay, hold on, wait. What's happening right now? Where am I feeling this in my body? I've gotten so much better. It takes practice. Just so everybody knows, it takes a lot of practice. And maybe it'll come easy to some people. I don't know. But for me, it's taken a lot of practice to really pay attention, which is after talking to you a couple of times about it. I feel like who you were with your friend when you first started questioning, like, psychedelic medicine is like where I'm at with you right now. Is like I've been asking you the questions because I'm so curious about it, especially where I'm at in my healing journey. I just kind of like feel stuck. We were just talking about like I feel stuck in my healing, and I want to get over the hump of those fears and tackling some of the pain that I feel from PTSD and all of the things. Because we've also talked about MDMA therapy, which you have tried as well. Which, can you explain like the differences between mushrooms and MDMA a little bit?
So I'll do so as best as I can as somebody who is still a novice in terms of being a talking person about it, because I don't want to give any misinformation. I'm also not great at memorizing things like here's what MDMA is made of and things like that.
No,
but so I'll just share with you what I'm, just so I can have everybody understand the caveat is that, how about I'll share from my personal experience.
Yes, of course.
And then we had alluded to in a conversation before the podcast that in a few months I can come back and talk a lot more from the perspective of I am undergoing training at the moment, but it's still in the works. So MDMA, psilocybin, mushrooms, when most people talk about that, and a lot of people prefer it, is because it's natural. It is of the earth and it is untainted. Well, you gotta make sure it's untainted, but it is untainted. It is mushrooms of the earth. MDMA is more chemical and synthetic. Somebody told me recently that there was a discovery that there's something in MDMA that still is like deep in its roots, like natural from its origins. But again, don't quote me on that. But there is, and so MDMA is also known as ecstasy and Molly. But we talk about it in the therapeutic sense because it's like MDMA treatment, like you said, for PTSD and other such traumas. So last year, and it was actually the same person, same friend. I was in the midst of a bit of a tumultuous dating situation. And I said something during a time we were spending time together where I said something about, I just feel like I am missing my connection of love to myself. I feel like it's faded out and I miss it. And she said, do you feel like you'd want to do an MDMA journey? And I said, yes, like right away. I didn't even know. I never even thought about it as a possibility. But for some reason, again, my body said, yes, it's time. Let's trust this. And, some people say it's a love drug and whatnot. But the thing to understand about MDMA is like it, as best as I can explain it, it shuts down your amygdala, which is your fear center. And when you are on this journey, you're able to go places or a place where you normally would not be able to go because of your fear of doing so. And I like to talk about my example of what happened to me in my first MDMA journey because it was unexpected to a certain extent, but then once it happened, I was like, hell yeah, that's where I had to go with this. And I mentioned my mom died. It's been about 3 years, And it was actually the day of the anniversary of her death last year that it happened to fall on, that I did this journey. And I knew it was because I had some things to delve into about my relationship with her. And let me just preface by saying I have come a long way in this, in where I recognize so much in terms of what her wounding was and how hard she tried to be the mom that she wanted to be. And in fact, she tried too hard to not be her own mother, and how that ended up making things oh so complex between us. And I really see her humanness, and am still grieving that to a certain extent. But last year during the MDMA journey, what I needed to do was be able to very boldly and openly and honestly talk out loud about what happened in our relationship that hurt me, because I was never able to actually talk to her about it. And anytime I even talked about it to a therapist or someone else while my mom was alive, she would say, like, oh no, I bet, if you're in therapy, oh no, I bet you're talking about me and how much I messed up, or things like that. So even after she died, I carried guilt anytime I tried to talk about what I needed to talk about, so that I could just process my own healing and my own feelings about it. So this MDMA journey, I just ended up right here in this room I'm sitting in now. I was just like, almost like a child, gleefully, just like, I finally get to say all the things I never got to say. And I just 3 hours worth of just like saying it because my amygdala was shut down, and I didn't have fear of hurting my mommy by saying these things, or I wasn't a bad person for saying these things. And the result of that experience, I could see in retrospect, it started me off on me really resolving my people pleasing tendencies, which were very, very strong at the time. And it took some integration and some work, and it's always a work in progress. But I recognize the core of it and how much that came from my relationship with my mom and my mother wound. And so there was just so much that I sat with for months and months and months, and had dreams that we were keeping distance from each other. And then eventually the dreams turned into us spending some time together. And again, there's always more layers to examine, but that journey just really, I felt so whole afterwards. And the quote from like Pinocchio came to mind afterwards. I was like, I'm a real boy. Not that I am a boy. I'm firmly in my non-binary space, but I felt my pieces come together. Like inside, I felt integration happen, like as if I could picture all these broken parts in me having that gold glue that mended me together once again. And I didn't know that's what it felt like to feel whole. I didn't realize I was missing that my entire life.
I have so many feels right now about everything, about you talking about your journey, because it's something that sounds so just appealing for me personally. And I know that people who are listening to this, that may be just finding comfort in knowing that there's an option out there that kind of can put those pieces together. I know it's something I have craved for a while. We've talked about it many times, because especially when you started talking about like it shuts down that fear part, that's just scared to feel all those things or say out loud the things that you've been trying to say. I know even personally with my mom, she wasn't a very good mom, alcoholic. She passed away when I was 25, and I never got to have those conversations with her. I never got to have any kind of closure with her personally, even about who she was as a person. It's like I never got to have those conversations. And then, of course, with my wife passing away, there's just a lot of things happening in my brain. And I do therapy every couple of weeks, and it's terrifying to talk about the things that I want to talk about. So every time you talk about, or we have spoken about like MDMA therapy, it's like I'm more and more convinced, like I'm starting to get to that moment where I'm like, I need to do this. And maybe in a few months when you come back, we can actually talk about that experience. I'm hoping, but
you're having your Oprah moment.
I am. I absolutely am. It's just, it seems like such a great opportunity for a lot of people who suffer from PTSD or any kind of trauma and stuff to tap into this form of therapy. Because if you're anything like me, who's had a lot of trauma and PTSD, I mean, we hold it in our bones 24/7. And it seems like a great option to be able to release a lot of that just holds us down. And I've spoken to you about this too. Like even in the last 6 months, there are days where I feel like somebody's holding me down on the ground. It's just things are just so freaking heavy that I can't function. I can't do the things that I want to do as a human being because I have all this weight on me. So I feel like people who are listening and hearing about your journey, it might be something I hope that they dabble into, or at least doing more research about it. Always do your research, especially when it comes to, like you said, MDMA is more synthetic, like doing research on that. I have never done whippets. I've never done anything.
I never did it after that.
The most I've ever done is like marijuana back in the day, and alcohol, of course, but I've been sober from alcohol for almost 5 years now. So being under the influence for me is even a little bit scary to think about in itself. But at the same time, it's like the therapy, the science behind the therapy is what I'm really interested in learning more about. What would you say to someone who is considering psychedelic therapy? Or that may be hesitant or unsure or just even consider it? What would you say to somebody?
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for sharing all that too, Alicia. I wanted to mention real quick what popped in my mind when Oprah interviewed Michael Pollan a few weeks ago on her show, who wrote the book, How to Change Your Mind. She interviewed a vet, a Vietnam veteran, and he was talking about his experience. I believe it was with mushrooms journeys. And he said, I feel like I finally came home. He's like, I had not come home from Vietnam yet. And I finally, I just got chills when I said that. And then he and some of his friends he was in Vietnam with, are still alive. They did a group journey together. And then it was like together, like they were all able to like have that sense of coming home and do that together. Oh, I just get emotional thinking about it. Yeah. Like the how this can be something that the potential for it, the healing potential for it. And so the reason that came to mind, I wanted to mention that is I think, for one, there is something to be said about reading about it, watching videos about it, and making sure that they are good resources. I can share some with you at the end of this if you'd like, that you could put out there, because then just see what happens when you hear these stories. And some of that can help relieve the fear, or maybe the fear is still there, but a part of your body is like, I don't know, this feels nice, this feels easy, this feels good. Like ease, like not easy, but like there's ease when I think about that, or when I feel it in myself. And then the fear comes up, and that's normal. Being able to just even expose yourself to more conversations around this can be helpful. Here in Colorado Springs, there's a couple of groups that meet locally, psychedelic integration groups, and there's a group called NOWAK, NOWAK, which is a psychedelic networking group. But Colorado Springs is actually really growing as a community in this way, which is really exciting. So there's people you can connect with and talk to. There's people online you can connect with and talk to start hearing, to alleviate fears about, here's the myths about it. And then from there, being able to talk to somebody who works with the medicine is really helpful. So for instance, myself and a couple of my colleagues who were going to start working together in this realm, we could, for instance, we'll have a website, and there's a consultation we could do where we can explore with you, like, where are you at in your life and what would make the most sense. We haven't talked about ketamine yet, but I'm going to be trained next month in ketamine assisted therapy, and having that as an option as well for folks. And so being able to have your questions answered, and then there's different approaches. The one I'm talking about is psychedelic assisted therapy, where there's the preparation ahead of time, there's the integration afterwards. But I believe that you'll find yourself in the right conversations at the right time with the right people, and be led. If there's somebody where they'll say, oh, I know somebody who does that, and there's more shamanistic approaches to it, ceremonial. So there's so many options. There's so many wonderful options out there where it could fit who you are and what would feel like the right way you'd want to approach it. But the biggest thing to keep in mind is that it is important to have some kind of guide, sitter, support, quote unquote, therapy beforehand, afterwards. The journey itself that you are on is, you're just somebody being with you to just hold space and make sure you're okay. That is like where you are. There's no therapy during done on that time. You are doing it, your own work yourself. But then having that support beforehand and afterwards is really important. And so that's where I don't know why I keep referring to Oprah, but she's just such a good example of it, where I can see, like at the beginning of the interview, if y'all watch that interview with Michael Pollan, like you can see she's admitting like, oh, it's weird, and scary, and no drugs, and da da da. And, which makes sense. We're all taught that, or we've seen it in our lives, and it impact people in negative ways. And then by the time the end of the interview, you just can like see her soften and just relax and be like, I didn't realize. Okay, this is how you approach it. Oh, that's why. And that's so interesting. And then her next interview she did with a woman who wrote a book called The Tell. And she had her big breakthrough by doing an MDMA journey in terms of what she needed to tell truth about in terms of something that happened to her as a teenager. And, Oprah, again, she's just like, what? Tell me more. What were you lying down? Where was your guide? What was she doing at the time? Like, she just was like really wanting to know those details, because that's what people want to know. So the website information that you're going to share with the listeners that I'll give you, our website, when I say our, I mean myself and my two colleagues who are going to business together around this, we're going to have lots of information on there about like those questions that people ask, because we know that those are the questions that people are wondering about, and are hoping to get a bit of a sense of ease. But all in all, it's okay to be nervous about something you haven't done before. Like,
Right.
you don't have to push that aside. Like, that's real, that's legit, and that's life. That's being a human.
Yeah. And it's still pretty new. Even I, like, as you said, Oprah's like, drugs are bad. It's like, yeah, we're taught drugs are bad our entire life. And I was in the military for 13 years, and drugs are bad. I didn't want to be around them, and I didn't want to be associated with them. And I retired, and I'm, with anxiety, depression, PTSD, all these things. And I'm starting to ask more questions and be a little bit more curious about those options, even though it sounds scary because drugs are bad or whatever. But there is a therapeutic element of this that's been ignored for a long time. There's a lot more research supporting it now for mental health. And one of the things that I look for personally is personal experiences, somebody's firsthand experience with that particular option. Because that's what really draws me into considering something a little bit more. Like, I live a plant-based lifestyle. I never would have lived a plant-based lifestyle had I not known somebody. Well, my wife, she was vegan, plant-based. So I never would have considered it had I not been exposed to it and started doing my own research and watching the documentaries and reading the books about the benefits of a plant-based lifestyle. This is very much the same thing where, getting somebody's first person account of the benefits of this therapeutic option makes it like way more possible, appealing, and definitely something that I know me personally would love to try. And it sounds like Oprah might give it a go too. So that also says something. Oprah has become a believer.
I know. I had to, like, after I heard that interview, I was like, she's gonna try it, and
Yeah.
then she's gonna share like but yeah, then I have to back off. I'm like, her journey, her space, like, give her space. Like, it could be next year. It could be 5 years from now. She just needs to think about it a little bit longer. So yeah, that's a huge lesson for me, even through my psychedelic use and then learning how to work with this with others, is how important it is to let everybody they have their own inner wisdom, and how to not interfere with other people, not just during, if I'm like going to sit for somebody in a journey, like life, every single moment of my life, where I look at my relationship with other people and where have I been accidentally or unconsciously trying to control a moment or a person or a reaction. And that usually, from my perspective in the past, has been through people pleasing, which is a more passive aggressive, manipulative way to do it. But it's still, in the end, is not me allowing myself to show up fully, not allowing the other person to show up fully. And yeah, all of it just continues to weave together. It's all the same in terms of what each of these aspects of life that I find like I'm really pulling a lot of pieces together. But I couldn't have done it, I guess I'll do a little full circle here, without the I guess what I'm calling it, the breakdown, my dark night of the soul that I had, that started in 2021. And it was physical health related, mental health related. This was obviously just a little bit after COVID, and having seen so many clients during that time and the burnout I experienced during that. My mom was diagnosed with cancer. I was in denial about my relationship with my partner being more than likely one that was not in my best interests anymore in terms of who I was, where I was at in my life. And within 2 months, my mom died. I closed my practice and ended the relationship with my partner, and then spent about 8 months just trying to figure out, like, just to get stable again, which I had a lot of help from the practitioners I mentioned before, and just didn't realize like how much I had so much going on, and there was no psychedelic use during this time. Was like, I'm too unstable at this point. It's really important to notice, like, there's a place where you need to be at when it's time to go into that. And so my nervous system was shot. I had been on antibiotics thinking I had an ear infection for so long. It turns out it was that eustachian tube dysfunction, but so that messed with my gut. It just was a mess. It was such a mess during that time, and it was so hard, but I went places, man, in my psyche and in my soul and in my heart that I needed to be able to show myself, for one, that I could get through that. But I learned so much about my body and my nervous system, and how to be kind to myself, and how to accept love and support from other people when I was struggling. And slowly, I really only feel like, I mean, it's been 3 years. Like, I feel like it's been the last few months that I'm like, I think this chapter might actually be closed. And, in life, each chapter blends into the next one. But like, that's what it has felt like, which is why it felt like this was really good timing to do this interview with you.
I love that so much. Thank you again for sharing all of that and being vulnerable. And I'm so proud of you as a human being, even though I've only known you for like a year now, but sharing your journey and everything that you've gone through and the steps that you have taken, because you have to have that desire, that motivation, all the things to like step into the space that you have stepped in and put in the work. You have put in the work, which is so admirable in itself. As human beings, again, we're so complex and complicated. And especially if you have trauma and all these things, like, you have to put in the work. It's not something that happens overnight either. And it can be scary, but if you step into it, there's so much relief in it. And you just, every time I talk to you, even on a bad day, it's like it's still like so wholesome. Like, you're in it, you're searching, you're doing the work, and I just really admire that about you. So, and I love that you came on here, and again, you shared your journey with everybody, and you're opening this can of experience and knowledge to a still new therapy for everybody. And I think it's so important to explore that and put it out there for everybody. And then the steps that you're going to be taking with this new practice with your colleagues and everything. I'm super excited for you and what you're going to be offering to the community. And I know we didn't get into the ketamine talk, but I really do think we should do a part 2, and you should come back on a few months, because I can't wait to hear the things a few months from now, what you've been doing, what you've put together, and the things that you can offer with your practice and whatnot. And we'll talk probably more about ketamine. And I think there was another therapy that you had mentioned before, and I can't remember what it was the last time we spoke. But yeah, I'm sorry that we have to cut this. I don't want to say short, because it's been like an hour, but I could talk to you all day. It's science.
Same.
Would you mind go ahead and share with everybody where they can reach out to you, follow you on the social medias? And of course, I will also list all of this in the notes.
Yeah, and thank you again for having me on the show and just being such a great person to share all this with. Like I said, the comfort level is key in terms of being able to open up about this. It really, I could feel it in my soul's calling is to go through a lot of this and be able to then share with others my experience so that it can help others, and then be able to, like, I'm in the process of creating, like, what's my own theory of healing, and be able to, like, share that. And so I have to go through my own shit. Am I allowed to curse on this podcast?
Of course.
Yeah, to be able to get there. And I appreciate your courage as well. And just, as I listen to you and have gotten to know you over the past year, I feel like we've known each other longer, because I think that has happened before.
Yeah.
But yeah, same to you. Absolutely. So, okay, let's stay in touch. Folks, well, I'm on Instagram at Dara Hoffman 22. And you can look me up on Facebook. You can even send me a friend request if you want at Dara Hoffman. And so a couple of websites that I'll share with you. They might not be live by the time you hear this. So write them down or come back again soon.
Yeah.
But one of them is going to be psychedelictherapy.com, and you can sign up for our newsletter, and we will talk to you a bit about the different offerings we're going to have, which will include group work and retreats and things like that. I am going to be seeing folks individually as well, not under my license. It will be separate from that. But I also would say that, yes, Alicia's going to share my email information in there as well, because I'm not sure which email I want to share with you quite yet, because we're coming up with new email addresses that have the word psychedelic in it. And so please do reach out if anything in this interview piqued your interest, no pun intended, and I love to keep this conversation going.
Yes. And I almost forgot, because I always ask this at the end of a podcast. If there is one little nugget of advice that you could share with the LGBTQ plus community, what would it be?
Well, I know things aren't easy right now, y'all. And I mean, on a national level and probably in your own individual lives as well. But if we add that on top of it, it is a stressful time. And what keeps coming back to me, especially the work I've been doing, is just to keep continuing to stay connected to, for one, the people in your life that you know that love and support you. Because when it comes to everything that's going on, like what's going to get us through is that love, that connection, that remembering of those little things every day that matter in our lives, that can still hopefully bring you joy and moments of insight into the world that lies beyond the nonsense and the shenanigans. Use the opportunity, as well if you can. This is bringing up a lot of fear and a lot of, and everybody's different in terms of how much they're being impacted by what's happening on a national level in terms of like what marginalized communities they are a part of or their jobs, things like that. So some of this is just survival, but when you're not in a moment of having to be in survival mode, it's really just your relationship with yourself is just really asking for you to turn towards it. Just love the shit out of yourself. Whatever you need to do to make that happen and get that care, get that support, explore new ways of healing, because in the end, everything that's happening now is pulling up things that already were in there that were already scary and needing to be faced and dealt with. It's just accentuating it like a mofo. And so I will in the future be putting together things specifically for the LGBTQ community when it comes to the psychedelic work. So again, just reach out. I'll be sure to get the websites going soon so that we can stay in touch and you can be kept up to date in the newsletter. And then we'll talk, me and Alicia will talk again sometime in the near future about this as well.
Yes, we will. And love the shit out of yourself. I think that's fantastic. Take care of yourself. You nailed it. It's an interesting time on a national level. The turmoil this country is facing, in addition to what's happening in our personal lives, it's just kind of stacking on each other right now. So love the shit out of yourself. Take care of yourself. Look into psilocybin research. We will definitely meet again to get an update and follow up about those additional opportunities for the queer community specifically, especially all the things. So thank you, Dara, my dear friend, for being on here today. I look forward to doing it again. If you do want to leave comments, just please leave comments for Dara or myself about this episode. You can also follow Queer in Here on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Queer in Here Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. You are loved. You are enough. Please lean on each other and ask for help when needed. See you next time.